but just taking a bit of a review of the script editor control itself. So previous weeks I've reasonably glossed over over some of the features of the script editor, some of which are fairly new. So I thought we'd just spend a couple of minutes just running through those. So if I go to add a new script and go to our script code window, we can see here we have the usual script code window in front of us. We usually click the button at the bottom to paste our template script code. Now that template script code, as I think we covered in previous sessions, is generated depending on the type of script that you select on the general page. It's just a general script which has a very simple main function, as well as the template script code button at the bottom. We also have our code snippets. They live here. Again, I think we've covered some of this stuff off. Our compile button and our build button, so we can actually go and test our script via this button here. You can also see in the little tooltip that you can F5. So we've got some shortcut keys now in the script code editor to make life a little bit easier. Those that are familiar with using Visual Studio will know there's a number of shortcut keys that you can use to remark code and toggle bookmarks and such forth. So we've introduced a few into the script editor window. So for instance, F5 will actually go through and run our script, and that is exactly the same as going to our test button and clicking the button there. There is also we can click the button here. We can run it via F5, as well as F5. We also have, if I go to another script that's a little bit more content, we can toggle bookmarks. So we have a concept of bookmarking in scripts, which I'm sure you're all aware of. So we can post various bookmarks throughout our code, which, when you're dealing with a script that spans hundreds or thousands of lines of code, that's really handy to be able to bookmark various segments so that you can easily find the bits of code that are really relevant to what you're working on. To move backwards and forwards between those bookmarks, just click these buttons here, and to clear them you can use the button here. We also have shortcut keys for these, and don't worry, I will provide a full list of the shortcut keys in the blog, which we'll upload at the end of the session. So we can Control and K to toggle bookmarks on and off, and we can use Control and L to go to the next bookmark, and I think there's even Control and J to go backwards and forwards. Okay, so again, stuff that I may have glossed over pretty quickly in previous sessions, or you may have seen me or heard me clicking or performing various shortcut keys and wonder what they are. So I thought we'd just spend a couple of minutes running through them. To put a script or any form in finPOWER Connect into edit mode, you can use Control E. Control E straight into edit mode. Control S will save it. When you're in edit mode, you can exit edit mode by using Control Shift and E. That will do the same thing, but it obviously won't perform the save, so that just doesn't save changes. As well as those, in our code, for the things that are specific to our code, we can remark and unremark code. So you can see here we've got some code that's commented out. If we use Control and comma, it's going to put that back in. Control and full stop to comment it back out again. Okay, so there are various various little shortcut keys which will help and help save you a little bit of time, as well as Alt and F1, which will actually launch our business layer help. And as I showed before, that's now context sensitive. So Alt and F1 with that highlighted will take you straight to the business layer help section for that particular object. And I realise I've just clicked the wrong button. You can also right click and access it here. So the button at the top will take you to the table of contents in the business layer help. To get to the context sensitive, it's either Alt and F1 or right click and use the business layer help shortcut there. Like I say, we may have covered one or two of those things before. I will provide all of those shortcut keys and a little breakdown of what they do in the blog at the end of the session. Okay, so we'll move on and have a look at the how we query the business layer. So in order to retrieve data from the finPOWER Connect database, we have a couple of different options. Obviously, we need to be able to do it via script, and we're going to run through in this session and in next session how we achieve that. But also to make you aware that you can run ad hoc queries via the run query form, which you can access off of the report menu. So you can see here we have the ability to run a system query. So all of the built-in system reports, everything that you find in Report Explorer, you can actually go and run the query that sits behind that that particular report in just a query window. So you can see here we get various options as we would do via the Report Explorer. It's a little bit quicker to go through and run it from here, so you can just hit finish. It's actually going to go and perform the query that sits behind that report template. It's going to go and perform that in here. You can see here that we've it brings back out all of the fields that query returns. Okay, if there is a client ID or an account ID or an external party ID, any kind of ID, then it will automatically give you the little drill down ellipse button here. So we can click on there and obviously access the relevant record. Okay, so as well as being able to run those existing report queries, we can also write entirely custom SQL queries in our in here as well. So for instance, we run select top 10 star from account, and I run that. There you go. That's going to run that query against the database and produce the results in a nice data table viewer. This data table viewer is really handy because it means that you can single click out to Excel, email, etc., etc. You can even merge these results with the results of another query. So if you go and run another query, you can go and click the merge, and it'll actually merge those two queries together and produce a table of those results. And again, there's an ID column, so you get the little ellipse to drop down to drill down on. So you can obviously do a lot of these things via the Report Explorer as well. Obviously, we've got a system built-in report. This is a nice, quick and easy way of querying the database. So you want to know how many accounts were opened in the last 6 months, where you can just run a really quick, simple query, and that will return those. We also have the option when we're running a query of saving our query to a data store. So for instance, if I load my query, here's two I made earlier. And this one just brings back a few fields and orders by account ID. You have the save query button here. So if you've written your big query in here, you can come in here, hit save. It'll save it away to the little query data store here, and you can build up a list of those. So if there's things that you're running or the client needs to run on a regular basis, it's a little bit overkill to have a report template for it, then you can go and set them up with a bunch of queries that they can come and access via the report menu. There we go, we can run that, and again, there's our results. Okay, so that's one way in which we can access the database from within finPOWER Connect. Obviously, that's pretty handy, but we will obviously also need to be able to do that via script code. So via the script itself, we have our select query builder object. IS select query builder. So there we go, that's the object that we use in order to query the database. Now the reason that we don't query the database directly is so we could write SQL in our script code and execute that via a data table or whatever, is that the script becomes extremely messy if there's big chunks of SQL dotted throughout. It becomes really, really hard to read. Also, you have to bear in mind that we support not only SQL, but we support Access. I don't know if we officially support any other database providers now, but at one stage I think it was possible to with MySQL and Oracle potentially as well. And you have to bear in mind that even between Access and SQL, the query language itself is slightly different. So for instance, wildcards in SQL use a percentage sign, wildcards in Access use an asterisk. So if you've hard coded all of your scripts to have big chunks of SQL, and you're doing a like clause or whatever that rely on an Access database, and you've put your asterisks throughout it, well, that's not going to work when it comes to running. If your client then upgrades to SQL, all of your scripts will stop returning your query results. If you use a query builder, it doesn't matter what database provider you're targeting. So it can be Access, it could be SQL, it could be whatever. It has the smarts behind it to work out which database provider you're using, and therefore how the query needs to be structured. So every single one of our queries, we use the select query builder object. This is actually the same object that we use in the source code for the finPOWER Connect application. So every single query that underpins finPOWER Connect, the application itself, is written using an select query builder. So everything that we've needed to do in producing our software has been able to be achieved using a query builder. So there should be nothing that you can't do that you need to do via your script using the same object. Okay, so we have a little script that I've written here, which basically goes and creates a query builder, and it then defines our query. So obviously the query, because we're using an object, looks a little bit different. We specify our table, we can specify top limits, we can specify distinct records, we add our fields, so these are the fields that we're going to be returning with this query. And then we also we can add joins, so we're joining the client table, and then we have our optional SQL where clauses. So we can identify here where the accounts are open, and we also, as you can see here, there's a line here to say always include the filter accounts SQL where for the current user. So if you've got filters set up so that your dealer users, for instance, can only see accounts that that belong to them, then if you did a query and didn't include that line, then it won't respect those filters. So all of a sudden your script will start showing things to people that they potentially shouldn't be seeing. So any of those sort of filters you've got set up to at the user level to prevent people from seeing certain records will only be respected if you've added this to your code. So it's really, really important that this always comes into play. Okay, and again, if you look at our code snippets, there is actually a sample here for the query builder. We've got a whole bunch more of these code snippets coming in the next version, and this actually runs through. It's in fact going to look very similar or exactly the same as the sample I've got here. So once we've built up our query, we can add order by fields, group by fields, all the things, everything you do in a query pretty much. We then execute it. So our query builder object has an execute data table. We can also execute it to data reader if you need to use data reader. Here we're then going to loop through the rows, and we're just going to debug some text out. Okay, if I comment that line out, because we're using a general user interface script, you remember from a few sessions back when we looked at a couple of the different script types, that a user interface script actually gives us access to the user interface business layer object. So from here, I can actually use my script code and say I don't need to do that. User interface.commonforms.show dataset viewer from data table. So in the same way, when we ran our query from the report button up the top, it showed us displayed our query results in a nice little data table viewer where we're able to go out to Excel. We can do the same thing using the dataset viewer from data table method here. And we simply pass it a data table. which case is our data table that we've executed our query into. We can give it a caption. And then if we run our script, there you can see that's performed our query, and it's opened up a little data table, data set viewer. So these again, really handy. We quite often have where we've had clients that say they want reports, and the sole purpose of the report is so that they can export stuff out to Excel. Not interested in the actual report template itself. They just want that data out into Excel. Well, this gives them a nice easy option of doing that. It's a single click here to get that information straight out to Excel. We can obviously use things like IS Excel and things as well now to build an Excel spreadsheet behind the scenes. But as I say, the show data set viewer from data table gives us a nice easy way to display that. Okay, and that's our, and again we've included account ID and client ID columns, so we get our drop downs in here. Okay, so just to recap, we can use our run query to run ad hoc bits of SQL. If you need to run a query inside of a script, then you must always use the select query builder object. And in doing so, your query is always going to be structured correctly. When it comes to adding SQL where clauses, you don't need to worry about escaping things for SQL. So so things like string values don't need to be escaped. You just simply need to use the correct append comparison string, append comparison integer, and that'll do all of that stuff for you. So you don't have to worry about converting dates to a SQL format for your query. It'll do all of that stuff for you. So I do encourage you to go away and have a look and play around with the query builder. Like I say, we have got a sample here in our snippets. We will be adding extra snippet code to show some different query options. So next week the plan is to run through the query builder in a little bit more detail. So we'll show you how you can perform subqueries and exist clauses and all of the some more advanced query options, but also how you can add progress bars and database transactions and things to correctly handle and gracefully handle your queries.